Hi, welcome to the new video doing the Orca, the killer whale in oils. So I've got my reference photo here, I've got my canvas down underneath, I've got my drawing already on there, and I've sprayed that drawing, which is already on that prime canvas, with a sealant, with just pastel or pencil fixative. It's going to not let it smudge there, and it's going to hold it fast. Now for this first stage, because this is such a complicated patterned water, what I'm actually going to do is block everything in acrylics. So acrylics are fast drying, so much faster than oils, and I'm going to be able to dry those with a hairdryer so I can keep carrying on the process much quicker. So the colours that I've got: acrylic colours, standard colours, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and I mix those two together to give me pretty close to the blue colour on the reference photo. I got a titanium or a zinc white, either will work, and then I've just got a standard black in there as well. So what I'm going to do, as I'm looking at this, is so complicated, the water, I'm thinking I'm going to block in the major shapes. So if things are mainly blue, I'm going to block them in blue, and if the shapes like above the Orca is mainly white, I'll probably block that in white. And then I'll probably put the reference photo back on there and trace the water patterns on top. Because it is, you can do it a couple of ways. You know, you can wing it and just mainly put, say, the white in above and then freehand the blue, or you can trace it on there if you want it more accurate. So there's a few ways of doing it. You can paint all of it blue and then put the white on top, or paint all of it white and then put the blue on top. And when I do something this complicated, I'm always struggling a little bit which way I'm going to do it. Because as I've said, there are a couple of ways of doing it, and I try to simplify it as much as possible. Now with the acrylic paints, obviously we thin with just water, and you can see my little water container on the left hand side. And I'm just thinning it every now and again, so that it's staying nice and opaque, and I've got plenty of coverage. And I'm using a synthetic flat brush, so there's nothing special about the tools I'm using at all. And I've just taped that canvas down to a bit of board with some masking tape. Lots ask me about the type of canvas I use. There's nothing special about that either. It's just a cotton canvas. You can use any you want, but don't go getting one that's too cheap. If it's really cheap, you'll be able to rip it and tear it with your hands. It's going to be rubbish. So get a half decent one. You don't have to go spend a lot of money. Now sometimes canvases come and they're already stretched, so they got those wooden bars around it, stretcher bars they're called, and that's great. You can use those. But because most of my paintings end up shipping overseas, I use unstretched canvas so that when it's dry I can roll it up and put it in a postal tube, which is much safer and also much cheaper for the collector. So hopefully that will answer any questions you've got about the canvas. The type of grains or type of texture on there, I usually have one that's very fine, just so I can put a lot of detail on there. And as I said, it's already primed. So if you look at the canvas, the front will then be primed white, and the black will either be kind of like an off color or browny color, so you know which side to actually use. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to continue blocking this in with acrylics. So that's the major shapes blocked in. Only thing left to do now is to get that black in for the Orca. So quite a bit of water going in with just straight black. I don't need to be too critical about the colours and that type of thing, because I am going to go over all of this. This is just giving me that map. This is going to make it much easier to cover the layer in oils. Sometimes you'll see that I do a tonal underpainting. So I'd use things like burnt sienna and tone the canvas. You'll see that in my other videos, but this time, because it's really just a few colours, there's no point doing that. It was easier just to go in with the acrylics as I'm doing here and block in the major masses. And then when I come on with oils, obviously when I'm doing, say, the Orca, I'm coming in with the blacks and the dark blues. I'm not going to be seeing the white canvas through it, so I'm not going to have to be putting layer upon layer upon layer and building up the oil layers. Because I'm going to have this underneath, it's going to be much quicker. With the water at the bottom, you can see it's mainly blue, so I decided in the end to just paint it all blue, and then I'll put the shapes back on top of it and paint it that way around. So once again, just going to block everything in. And the final bit of blocking in is going to be the white. Don't really have to do this because the canvas is already primed, and that would have been an acrylic primer, so it's basically a white acrylic. But I wanted to make sure that I've got plenty of paint underneath, and I'm going to go over some of these blue bits as well, because I can then get the shapes back in later on as I trace those shapes back on top. So I'm going to go across, just go over these and re-establish them later on. Okay, so this is the tracing section. So I've got transfer paper, graphite side down. Got my reference on top with just standard printer paper. You can see I'm just using a pen. I check every now and again, is it coming through? Yes, it's dark enough for me to see it. So I'm just going to trace these shapes over the top. Now, some people say, is this cheating? Is it not cheating? To be honest, I really couldn't care less. It's very complicated markings. If you wanted to freehand it, freehand it. I could have freehanded it. It would have took me a lot longer to do. I haven't got the time to waste doing lots of freehand sketches when I'm pushing out so many videos for people and doing tutorials and doing paintings for myself. So if I've got to use a quick way of doing it, that's how I'm doing it. And if people want to discuss whether it's cheating or not, when they're discussing and arguing about that, I'm actually creating more paintings. So I'm not concerned at all. So, you know, you can do whatever you want with it. And this is the way that I actually did it. So I'm not holding or hiding anything back. I'm showing you exactly the way I've done this. And you can see even then it's still really time consuming. I did think about just winging it and putting in the suggestions, but if I show you all different ways, and you guys can decide for yourself and make your own choices. So time for the oil painting stage. So I've got it all taped up now onto my easel, so it's vertical in front of me. You can do it flat if you want. Got the reference photo underneath, got my glass palette on the side so you guys can see it at all times, and I've got a few colours out there as well. And I think this is the painting I've done with the least number of colours all the way through it. So starting from the top, Cad Yellow Deep. Underneath that, Windsor Red, Titanium White, Cerulean Blue, Cobalt Blue, and I've just got some more white at the bottom as well. So I'm using Cobalt Blue instead of Ultramarine Blue because Ultramarine Blue has got more of a purpley tinge to it, and blues are one of those things that can be a little bit difficult to match. And you can see here I've just put up a reference photo where I've dragged colours out so that I can easily mix up my colours, especially on something that's got as few colours as this. I can mix up a lot of colours because their oils are not going to dry too fast, and I can check them against my reference image with the colours pulled out in Photoshop, and I show you how to do that on YouTube. And it's a really simple process. So if you're a beginner, I urge you to do something like this. It's going to be much more relaxing for you then when you actually do the painting itself, because you know the colours are going to be very close, even at this blocking in stage. So it's another tip and technique I wanted to show you guys. So mixing up the colours, the thinners I'm using is just an odorless thinners. So you can use something like the Bob Ross odorless thinners, or you could use Gamsol. That's another really good odorless thinner. I'm not using anything else. I'm not using any liquid at all on it. There's no need, because although the water is very, very complicated, the shapes in this, if you take your time, it's quite a simple process. There's not a lot of shading or variances. There's no textures like fur on it. So I'm just mixing up that colour, getting that blue roughly right, because there's going to be a couple of layers, but the closer I get to it now, then the easier it's going to be to do the layers that's on top. So I'm just getting a nice little pile of paint there. Then I'm adding in some more white. So I've got that dirty brush, paint's already on the brush, adding some white, putting a little bit of thinners as well, just for the slightly lighter tones. You see, I can check it out there. Is it close? It's pretty close. And that's the way to work with this. Take your time on the actual mixing process. Now, cad yellow is going in. That's deadening the colour down a bit. Check out my video on mixing accurate colours and matching colours, and you know why I'm doing that. It's all about complementary colours, colours opposite on the colour wheel. Even on something this simple, it's not a pure blue coming straight out the tube. And no matter how many tubes or how many colours companies actually supply, they're never going to supply everything you need. So you need to be able to mix and match colours. That's one of the basics you really got to know. So I'm going to continue making these colours up, getting them right, and then I can start that blocking in again with oils. So as there's only going to be a couple of colours I'm working on here, I've zoomed right in. No point you seeing the palette, 'cause I'm not really mixing anything. This is just plain white going in. And as you can see, I've got my graphite marks on there now, so I know where the blue sections are going to be. So I'm going to be able to speed quite a bit of this up, fortunately for you lot, because you're not going to have to sit through lots of tedious blocking in like this. And that's the hard part of this particular painting. It's not that we've got lots of tricky blending or lots of colour matches or anything kind of like that at all with it. What we've got is lots of shapes to follow. This is almost like a real blocking in, almost like a paint by numbers one. Very different than what I normally do. Now, if you want, you could work this one just as easily in acrylics, because we don't really need that open time we get from the alkyd oils for blending and for building up textures and furs. We're just blocking in and following a lot of lines. So acrylics would be just as good for it. The main thing I don't like about acrylics is they dry a different tone. So I like my oils because what I put on there, when it dries, it stays the same. Acrylics are not really like that. And that's why I've still stuck with oils. Plus, I don't like to paint for much more than an hour or two at a time if I can help it. Just makes my back and neck ache. So I'm definitely going to be allowing this to have a few layers on there. So I'll be painting in the day and then I'll leave it dry overnight and then I'll come back to it the next day. So I'm going to speed it up because you can see exactly what I'm doing, and it's just going to be a lot more of the same. So now I've got that section of white done. I'm going to come in now, everything there is still wet, that white, and I'm going to use my blue mix, filling in those gaps. I'm not worried about all the little intricacies that's in the water. I need to get the blocking in major shapes done first. I don't want to worry about all those little elements, because that's when it starts to really get confusing. So if I get these bits in, get them out the way, let them dry, then I can come back in, start to refine it a bit more. Now with the paint, if you're following along with this for practice and the paint's difficult coming off of the brush, add a little bit of thinners to it, then it's going to come off a lot easier. But don't put so much in that it actually starts running down that canvas. Now if you're quite gentle, delicate with the paints, you can also put lighter tones over wet paint as well. So you can, work wet and wet, but when you want a pure colour, so if I wanted a pure white like in the water above, then I'd even not have wet paint under it or allow it to dry, or I wouldn't be doing the wet on wet when I wanted a real punchy white. You can see it's going on very easily. I haven't got to keep loading the brush too many times. So because I'm still feel fresh enough to carry on painting, I want to get as much painting done on this day as I can. So I'm just doing these, even if it's just giving me the suggestion of where I want the light tips of the ripples and the waves to be when I refine it the next day. So I'm really just building up that map for me to follow, with more details on top later. Now if your studio setup is like mine and you're right-handed, don't put that paint over on the left hand side. I've only got that there because sometimes I zoom out, I show you the palette, and on lots of my more complicated fur videos then you'll see the palette all the time. But when I'm right-handed, it's awkward. I've got to reach across, but if I put it on the left you wouldn't actually see it and I'd be in the way all the time. But having to reach across does give me a bit of a bad back, and I'm gonna have to try and sort something else out, because it's starting to affect my back that I'm in an awkward position trying to video this. So I've got my reference photo below because that's just dry acrylic, so I can tape it to it. You can see my very minimal colours there on my palette, and I'm just going to put in little suggestions of these ripples on the top just for now. I'll come back later and I'll detail that up. Now the brush I'm using is synthetic round, nothing special about it. I think it's a number 4. I think you can just make it out, and it may actually be a number 4 rigger. I can't quite remember. In fact, yes, it is this Rosemary & Co Shiraz rigger, and I can get a nice chiseled edge to it going side to side in the paint, and that gives me a nice chisel fine edge, as you can see, so I can get really fine lines out of it. Let's go a little bit lighter, added some white into it. And this is really more of the fiddly part of the painting. Again, these small suggestions in there. All of this reflected water on the ripples on that surface. That's what's going to make it look glassy. But it's boring for you guys to watch. It's repetitive. I've got lots of areas to do. I think the painting took me about 5.5 hours in total, which is quite a long time considering it doesn't look that large and there's not many color changes or anything complicated like that in it. But it's just simply because I've had lots of these little tiny elements to paint in. So I'm just going to speed it up once again so I can slow it down when we start changing techniques. Just slowed it down so you can see that I'm still doing the same technique. Nothing's really changed. I have added a little bit of blue and red to the white mix. You can see I'm just changing it a little bit there, because this top white water, it's got a bit of a bluey pinky tinge to it, so it's not pure white when it's up here. And I'm painting the suggestion. I'm not worried about it matching exactly that reference, because you know what, a second later all that water changed. As the ochre is moving in it, everything is changing, so things don't need to be in exactly the same place. As long as I've got that suggestion, that feeling of the water and the ripples in it, that's all I care about. So I'm not going to be showing anybody else a reference other than you guys. People are just going to be seeing my painting. So I'm just lightening this section up. I can see that the lines on top don't represent the reference that much, but I will be coming back in with more blues later on. But this is giving me the base of that warm white. I'm just changing the hue, changing the colours, the lightness and darkness slightly every now and again as I'm seeing differences on the reference. When I'm going over to the right hand side, that's when I'm adding just the tiniest dot of paint thinners. So same process over on this right hand side, only now I'm going to be putting the white over the blue because there was more blue sections here, so it made sense to me to mass in the blue. I've just got to be careful then that I'm following the right lines, and that's what this stage is all about. This is my stage where I'm concerned about the placement, getting the right areas pretty much drawn in the right places. Because the bits I'm really concerned about are the ones where I've got the dark of the ochre and that reflected into it. That's the only bits that's got to be right. And that's the bits at the bottom of the canvas. So I'm just working out where in this jumble of lines now I've got to put the white, the lighter tones. Now the beauty of the acrylic underpainting is, if I get it in the wrong place, I can just wipe it off. And you can be as accurate, as time consuming on this as you want, or you can just go for that quick suggestion. And I'm going pretty much in between those two. So I don't want this painting to work out to be a massive duplicate of the reference. It's going to take me 20 hours or so to do. Just want to show you lot the way I'm tackling this complicated water scene. So I'm just going to continue this process, just simply following my lines, blocking in where I need to. Now this section here is a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to take my time on this as well, because this area has got a lot more of those dark black areas in there that I want to get pretty much right. So you can see I can't get a pure white line now because I've got that solid blue under there, so I know I'm going to have to use a couple of layers. The only way I could have got it very white is if I used really thick paint, and I didn't want that texture on the surface. So I know I'm going to have to put a couple of layers on this, possibly 3. So I'll let each layer dry first. So I'm just going to take my time. I'm just basically drawing in and filling in, colouring in with my brush. This really is an exercise in observation and patience more than anything else. Okay, so slowed back down, and I'm starting to now put in the more interesting part. This is the bit that's going to make it look like it's reflecting the Orca itself. So to make it look real, I need to really study the tones of the Orca in the reference photo. So it's not as black as we're seeing with the Orca out of the water. So it's a shade or two darker, lighter, sorry. So basically I've got my blue and my black together, and then I put in a little bit of white just to lift that tone a bit, just to make it that little bit lighter. And now I need to be careful of where I'm placing the elements. If I get anything wrong here, that's where it's going to look wrong, and it's going to be easy to spot. If I get blue bits on the section above the Orca in the wrong place, it doesn't really matter. But if I get it wrong here, it's going to look awkward. So I need to get my lights right, and I need to get my darks right. Now, in general, with reflections, the rule is the darks are going to appear a bit lighter and the lights are going to appear a bit darker. And that's what we expect to see. That's what our brains expect to see. Whether you understand it or not is irrelevant. That's what's going to look correct to us. So carefully blocking in. But once again, I'm going to be going over this probably another once, and the white areas another twice. So main thing I'm trying to do is just block in the correct shape. Now I've got that dark area put in, I'm going to start with the light, and this all of a sudden now is going to start to make it look like it's reflecting. It's that play of light against dark and those horizontal strokes. You can see I'm being fairly careful now when I'm blocking in. I want to try and keep the edges and that as good as I can, so I'm not muddying everything up too much, so I haven't got to keep altering and keep adjusting all the time when I come back. And when I got more of a block of colour, that's when I'm just going for it, blocking in much quicker. Now this is slightly pinky orange colour, it's not pure white. So I've added in some of my Windsor red, some of my Cad yellow deep, and plenty of the white. So it's kind of an off-white. Once again, I'm going to carry on this process now, mainly with these horizontal strokes. And that's quite useful to do that with water, because you know the ripples and everything is horizontal. So that's kind of like when I'm doing fur and I'm saying follow the fur direction, now I'm following the water direction. And now on this outer edge, it's kind of a darker blue. So I've made up my dark blue mix. I've just put a small amount of black in there. A bit of white as well. And that's just going to be a darker blue on this outer edge. Still using fairly large brushes at this time, not having to go to any small brushes yet. I'll keep that for the last layer also, and when I'm just putting on little tiny highlights as well. So I try to use the largest brush that I can at the time. Helps to keep it all a little bit looser, and obviously it fills in areas much quicker. See a lot of people actually using tiny brushes for even large areas. Wears your brushes out quick and it takes ages to fill in the areas. Just going to do a little bit of work on the Orca now on that mouth area, that lower jaw, and the colour I've mixed up, just a little bit of that Windsor Red, Cad Yellow Deep. I put some of my blue that's already mixed there in there as well, and white, and that's giving me this kind of a dirty salmon-y colour. I'm just blocking in, large brush again. Just so that what I'm doing is just building up layers, building up accuracy all the time. Taking it a little stage at a time. I'm not trying to finish any element at all yet. Nothing on this is finished. Don't forget the dark area is still all acrylic. The white area on the Orca is still all acrylic. But everything I do, everything like this, is starting to add more realism, more accuracy to it. You see, I just put in some extra white there then just to blend, make it all a little bit lighter. Scrubbing it in. I make my brushes work quite hard so they don't last too long. But then I don't pay much for them either. They are quite reasonable in price. So basically just blocking in again. You can't really go wrong on this at all. Beauty with the oils, you see I can just blend together, whereas acrylics would have started to dry then and wouldn't be easy enough, as easy to blend as with the alkyd oils. Now on this outer edge it's a little bit darker in colour, so I've added a bit more of the red, yellow and blue. And that's all it is, just slight adjustments here and there. If the colour looks a bit more red hue to it, I'll add slightly more red. And then on this outer edge, that needs to be a bit darker. So I've gone with a darker blue. It's a bit subdued, that colour, rather than the blue of the water. So I've put some black in there and then white, just not to make it too dark. And I can blend the edge again then. Easily like that. Just a light stroke with the oils. Nice and easy with oils. And as I said, I'll come back and refine all this as well, but that's looking a lot better already. And just a bit of a suggestion up here of the correct colours in the mouth area too. I'm just going to pop the highlights in so I know where they are when I'm doing the black, so I'm not losing the position of them. And even on this underpainting stage on the Orca, you can see just popping these highlights in, just a suggestion, already is starting to make him look shiny. Okay, so let's continue with the process of the bottom water. As I said, this is the area, these are the more important areas, the bottom section, because that's what's reflecting the black and the whites that makes this image, or made this image really appealing to me. And it's what's going to make the water look shiny and reflective and have that wet look to it. So simply blocking in, that's all I'm doing. I'm just following the reference, I'm following my lines, I'm using horizontal strokes. I'm not worrying about getting it complete coverage on the canvas in this first layer with oils. As I said, I will come back and do more. So I'm just concentrating on the placement, just putting these elements in the correct place. And you can see now that I'm putting in this black in the water, how blue that large section is to the right of it. So you can see there, horizontal strokes. Using a flat brush. So it's giving me plenty of coverage and it's giving me a sharp line when I need it. Checking out exactly where it's got to go. If an area is a little bit confusing, which lots of areas are on this painting in the water. And then when I'm sure I'm in the right place, I make the stroke. So now it's a new day, everything's dry, all dried overnight, and I'm going to start to come back in with a second layer, more refinement, and start to look at areas that need adjusting and altering. So I'm looking at more of the finer detail now. I'm looking at matching the colours more accurately as well, so I can get my reference really close, stick it on there because I know it's dry, and the closer I can get that reference to the area within reason, then the easier it is to match it. So I'm doing same technique, exactly the same thing I did first time round. I'm just being more accurate, more careful, and getting the placement and the colours that bit in the right place basically. So I start off with the major masses, then second layer I'm refining it and looking at more of the smaller areas. So I've zoomed right in now so you can see how really fiddly a lot of this water is. But I'm still not using tiny brushes yet. Now on the reference, this whole top section is slightly blurred. Now the way to get that with the oils would be to try and do that whole section in one sitting and go over it with a soft brush. That'd be the easiest way to do it, or to work on small sections and use a soft brush. But I'm not concerned about getting that slight blur. I'm not concerned that mine is going to be a sharper look to it, because it's just going to look like I used a larger f number on the camera, so it is not blurring out. It's still going to look like water, and I'm not going to have to be concerned about doing that softening stage. You can see here that I'm just refining shapes using pretty thick paint so that I can get the coverage, and just working more now on that detail and on the placement. Coming out now with the smaller brushes, just to start to paint in some of these smaller ripples. So you can see we started off with the large shapes, and we went to the middle-sized shapes. Now we go into the real finer detail. And even with this, I will come back in again, but you've got to start somewhere. So I'm just after the suggestion now of these ripples. So when the viewer is back 4, 5, 10 feet, it should look correct. I don't want it really, I'm not concerned if it looks a bit raggedy when the viewer's basically pushing their nose up against the canvas. That's not what it's all about. It should look real when they stand back a bit. That's what I'm actually after. When they get up close, they can see that it's, you know, it's a painting, and that's good. I'm not after hyper realism, because I'd have to spend another probably 50 hours on it, and when you stand back 10 feet it'd look the same anyway, so I'm not concerned about that. Just after that, the essence of it, the suggestion. So small brush, rigger brush, they come in everything from little 00s all the way up to 10s, and you just get the brush size that suits what you're actually doing with it. So hope you've enjoyed part 1, and on part 2 we're going to come back, lots and lots more detail, lots more refinement, and getting that wet look on the Orca as well.